republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all.
Thank you. This meeting is being televised by Chelmsford Telemedia. Is anyone else present that plans to record? Okay. All right, welcome to this meeting of the Chelmsford School Committee. Before we start, I just want to clarify one of the things on the agenda. We do have an executive session scheduled at the end of the meeting. Currently, it's under new business, but I think probably better if we moved it till after liaison assignments and new reports. That way we can finish up the meeting and then go into executive session and not return. So is that okay with everybody?
Yes.
Okay, great, okay. All right, so the first item of business tonight is approval of the minutes from our meeting on January 7th.
I make a motion to approve the school committee meeting minutes from January 7th, 2020.
Any seconds?
Second?
Okay. Any corrections or comments? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
5-0. All right, next up, we have our Chelmsford High School representatives.
Hi. Hello, everyone. Today, semester 2 started at school, and after the conclusion of midterms last week, and also on January 30th through February 1st, there's a children's play called The Big Top in the Pack, and there's also a Valentine's Day dance coming up later in February.
Also, there will be MCAS bio retesting on February 5th and 6th, and also on February 12th, there will be a half day, and that is all we have.
All right, anybody have any good news?
Yeah, it's a quiet good news. We were just talking about there's not a lot going on because finals and everything midterms, finals. I already have graduated. So a couple of things. Last night was Taste of Chelmsford. A lot of our school administrators, our coordinators are all shooting lots of pictures to us. They said they had a great time and they were very full towards the end, so that went off very well. We do have upcoming on February 6th, we have our coming to high school night, so 8th graders coming to the high school, so we want to make sure that we get that message out and have our students come along and come and enjoy themselves at the high school and find out what's happening. And that's it for good news.
Great. Anybody else? Jeff?
On January 9th, I went to the after-school groups concert, and it was the jazz band under the direction of Matt Sexauer, except they don't practice after school. They practice 6:30 in the morning. And the two a cappella groups, the Crescendos in the Thursdays, the Manda Riders, the director of that, and the CHS Student String Orchestra. Clayton Sanders is the advisor, and the student conductor is Elaine Chen, and it was a great evening of music. It was fun.
Anybody else? I just wanted to congratulate our girls basketball coach, Kevin Branco, who got his 200th win recently, so congratulations to Kevin. Okay, we're now to our public input part of our meeting. If anyone would like to speak to the committee about any of the items on tonight's agenda, please come forward and state your name and address for the recording secretary. Okay, all right, so we're on to new business.
Thank you. First up, I would like to have Mr. Simonian from the Chelmsford High School Alumni Association. You can't get out of it either.
Good evening.
Evening.
You all know Terry.
Yes. I figured I'd let you introduce him because he had something special going on tonight.
That's right. Terry is the longtime president of the Alumni Association, okay? And he's the one that keeps me in tow.
That's a full-time career.
The Chelmsford High School Alumni Association proudly announces its 30th annual Hall of Fame induction. The ceremony will take place on the evening of the 21st of March, 2020, at the UMass Lowell Conference Center in Lowell. The program will include a social at 5:45, dinner at 6:30, and the induction at 7. Those being inducted are as follows: Keith Arcoin from the class of 1997, Kara Campbell, class of 1996, Matt Cheslek from class of 1991, Dan Curran from the class of 1995, Rebecca Friedman, 1998, Terry McSheehy, class of 1964, Stan Norkunis from class of 1964, Jeffrey Parks, class of 1991, and Jennifer Clancy Petro Roy from the class of 2000. This is an outstanding group of young folks, okay? This is the first time we've had a majority of the group is from the 20s. Okay? Great bunch. It's unbelievable what these kids are doing.
Terry included in the young group?
Yeah.
Terry?
The young group?
No,
Yeah.
not quite.
He and
Stan and I are the anchors.
He and Stan are the grandfathers, okay? Yeah. It's amazing. When we were going through this thing in the fall, I said to the committee, I said, you know, why don't we just put them all in and we'll have one great big show for it's unbelievable. It's hard to pick, you know, the candidates. And one of the nice things about the way we handle this is you're in the pool for 5 years. And so if you're bound to make it if you got the credentials. And by and large, 99% of the people that are brought forth are capable. Very, very strong, very strong. It's amazing. One of the girls here, she's been nominated for a number of Emmys. 3 times she's been nominated for Emmys. That's unheard of. I mean, you know, that's a big prize, okay? You got an All-American wrestler here. The football coach from Merrimack College.
Yeah, it's a good group.
It really is, it really is. And I wish you'd all come and see it and hear them, okay? Please do come. I have tickets.
How much are tickets, George?
Tickets right now?
$60.
$60.
As I have been for the last number of years. Yeah, okay. And it's a great take, okay? And it's a great place. They love to have us there, and they do a good job. Those of you that have been there, they sure you know, okay? Questions?
No?
No. Can I just offer one comment? I really appreciate because I know a lot of communities do alumni associations a little different, or Hall of Fame's a little different, but Chelmsford's where it's not only athletics, or not only, say, community service, or someone being successful later in life.
It's the
It really
entire-
can take into consideration the whole body of work of someone and their impact that they've had on Chelmsford High School. So I enjoy it every year. I appreciate your work, George and Terry, so thank you.
Good. There's a story behind the Hall of Fame. Not for the public, but there's a story. And I won't get into it, okay?
We probably should just mention that we have a date for the awards night, just so everybody knows. It's May 28th.
Okay.
Okay.
For
That's
you
the senior awards?
seniors, be aware if you applied for a
That's the
scholarship.
scholarship night.
Save the date.
We're up to 138
Pretty good.
Hall of Famers.
scholarships.
Oh, scholarship. Oh, God.
No, Hall of Fame is over
Yeah.
300, yeah.
Great.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
See you,
Appreciate it.
Okay, don't forget, tickets are they're available.
I'll write my check out and I'll leave it with Debbie for you.
No, I didn't take them with me.
all right, thank you, guys.
Thank you.
Have a good night.
Congratulations, Terry.
Congratulations.
Yes.
All right, second up this evening, we have a very dapper Dr. Matthew Brenevent here to tell us about some of the work that's ongoing in the mathematics department.
Thank you very much, Dr. Lang, Dr. Hirsch, members of the school committee. This year I decided to change up the presentation a little bit. In the past, I have kind of gone through a year at a glance at each of the different levels. This year, what I wanted to do is kind of hit upon some of the big topics within the mathematics department that affect all of us, including the parents, that I wanted to be able to take some time to elaborate on. So that's what I'm going to focus on today for this presentation. And like the joke that Dr. Hirsch played on me earlier at our council meeting, I don't have a clicker that actually works.
You should be able
So
to put it on.
I know it is on, my friend.
Okay.
So therefore, if you could just advance the slide for me, please, to the second slide. Excellent. So the first thing that I wanted to do is share a little bit about the philosophy of the mathematics department, K-12. And then I will, as I said, talk about 3 of those big picture issues related to, one, standards-based report carding and how it affects the mathematics department at the middle school level. The second being the honors placement criteria, as that is coming up for our current 6th graders coming into 7th grade, as well as our 8th grade students moving into 9th grade. And then finally spend some time talking about the proposed leveling change at the high school and what it looks like for the math department. Share a little bit of that information and then take some time to answer some of your questions that might come up around these things. So the first thing has to do with the philosophy of the mathematics department.
That button right there.
Thank you very much. What we believe in as teachers of mathematics is that we want to have our students build conceptual understanding of the topics. When many of us who are a little bit older went to school, we very much believed in the procedural knowledge or procedural fluency, very much about the memorization of the steps. What the state standards call for, what our curriculum supports, and what our teachers focus on is very much the conceptual understanding. Why does the mathematics work the way that it does? Helping understand the reasons why the formula for area of a circle is pi times radius squared, and why the Pythagorean theorem is a squared plus b squared equals c squared. And we try to do the mathematics in a joyful manner. If you look within the STEM field, the science, the technology, and the engineering, many times students authentically enjoy being in those classes. And then you have us, the ugly stepsister of mathematics, where many times they ask those questions, when am I ever going to use this, and why do I have to study this? So we within the mathematics department try to bring out the joy in mathematics to see that it's not just about the real world application, but it's a study of patterns and numbers and how much it can truly be applied to the real world, but also can just help us be better thinkers, problem solvers, and really try to just think of it as a language of the universe and not just about the numbers. And finally, we at all the different levels try to promote the ideas of growth mindset. For those of you that aren't aware, there's two ideas that come out from the work of Dr. Carol Dweck and Dr. Joe Bowler from Stanford, the fixed mindset and the growth mindset. With a fixed mindset, students believe that they either can do the math or they can't do the math, and their intelligence is static. So they say, I'm either a math person or I'm not a math person. But we within the math department believe that everybody has the ability to learn mathematics at the highest levels. And if they have hard work and perseverance, you can succeed. So the philosophy of both the teaching and our curriculum very much promotes a growth mindset where we want to offer the students an opportunity to take retakes on assessments so that it's not just a one-shot deal, you either do well or you don't do well. And we know that mathematics builds upon itself. It's not as though there's these isolated subjects here that if you study one thing and you don't do well on it, it doesn't matter because we're going to study something completely different. It builds upon itself, so the prerequisite prior knowledge is so important. So we really try to pride ourselves on having teachers focus on making sure that even if a student didn't learn it the first time or the second time, that we don't give up on them and give them the support they need depending on what level they're at in school and what courses they're at, have them the opportunity to get that knowledge into their schema so that as they advance mathematically, they're more likely to be successful. So that's the philosophy that I have tried to bring to the math department, and I believe that it is translated very well. We're hearing much less negative connotations or negative comments about mathematics, that it's no longer this, oh God, we have to do math. But math can be fun and it can be joyful, and it's something that we pride ourselves throughout K-12 doing with the growth mindset. Now, moving from the philosophy to some of the more practical things that we know that you as a school committee and the parents and the community wants to better understand. So the first thing is the standards-based grading. And a few weeks or months ago, Dr. Hirsch came in and did a presentation about the standards-based grading, and I wanted to share a little bit about the perspective of it within the mathematics department at the middle school level. As you know, we do standards-based grading at the elementary level, and we've been doing it for countless years. It was about 4 or 5 years ago that we moved to the standards-based updating it, but we've always been doing standards-based report card grading at the elementary level in all the subjects, including the mathematics. So it came about the discussion about why would we want to move to this particular idea at the middle school level. And what I want to share with you is just a little bit of a perception about how we as parents can view a report card. My own child has started middle school, and on her report card, she gets a grade and it says a 92 or an 85. And I don't really know what it tells us, except that she's a pleasure to have in class, because that's the comment that corresponds with this. Within mathematics in particular, there are many different aspects. There's the algebra, there's the geometry, there's the statistics probability, there's the number sense, and it's important for all stakeholders, the teachers, administrators, parents and the students themselves to know what areas are we strong in and what areas might there be support in. So as you can see on the slide here, with the standards-based report card, we give, in a similar way to what we do at the elementary level, a proposal to give specific information about how students are doing on the big picture mathematical concepts. Within each grade level, there are 5 domains, which are what are the 5 big ideas that we're trying to do. And then the teachers, in coordination with the math coach and myself, have selected what we call the power standards. What are the big standards that we have with the Massachusetts curriculum frameworks, where there's 37 of them about at each grade level? How can we narrow it down to about 10 or 12 standards that we know we cover in detail, and they correspond with both our curriculum as well as our assessments? And then we come up with a way to assess it outside of the traditional number system or letter grades, where we want to know if they are meeting the standard, approaching the standard, or sometimes are they developing where they're not quite at the standard. You'll notice that within the mathematics proposal, we have some shading that occurs. If a particular concept is not taught in this term, we gray it out that it's not going to be assessed. But once a topic, once a standard is assessed over the course of a year, we continue to assess it, because our goal is that by the end of the year, every student is at the minimum meeting the standard. So if they're not meeting the standard, and it's not covered again within our core curriculum, be it big ideas for grades 6 to 8 or math expressions in grade 5, we have opportunities for the students to be able to meet the standard. It could be through our IXL program, it could be through iReady, it could be through our team time in grades 5 and 6, where students have the opportunity to get extra help and support. But we want to be able to show that students are more than just a number. They are a mathematician, and for most of them, they may not be successful in every single standard, but we now have a means to be able to assess them in multiple ways and be able to determine if they are meeting the benchmark standards. And those standards change over the course of the year. The most simplest example that we can give has to do with an elementary example, but at the end of term 1, we want our students to be able to count up to the number 10. Well, now that expands in term 2, where we say we want them to be able to know their numbers up to 20, and then by the end of the year know their numbers up to 50, so that the benchmark, or what the expectations are for meeting the standards, grows over the course of the year as they are learning whatever this particular standard is. And on the slide, you can see an example that comes from 4th or 5th grade, as we see a number sense, what it represents in term 1, term 2, and term 3. And there are many benefits of doing this sort of standards-based report card grading, not only to give more information to parents, but it also helps all of us within the classroom, the teachers themselves, because it gives an opportunity to say, okay, you might count homework as 30%, but you might not count homework at all as a grade, and you might give extra credit, but you may not. So we have consistency. Are they meeting the expectations for learning the mathematics? And I believe that by moving to a standards-based report card at the middle school level, it will give everybody that additional information and would provide consistency among teachers, because we are currently working on developing not just the benchmarks, but what are those common assessments that we are using throughout all of grade 5, no matter what teacher you have or what school you're at, be it Parker or McCarthy. And then we are able to have a consistent grading scale that alerts, again, all of the stakeholders, including the children. The next topic also relates to the middle school, and that is our honors placement. The way we do things within the mathematics department is a little bit different than every other subject. Most other subjects starts the leveling when they go into 9th grade. The Common Core and the Massachusetts state standards call for it to occur in 7th grade, and so that's where we, within the Chelmsford Public Schools, start our leveling in the 7th grade. And what we like to do is begin the process in 6th grade, and we let everybody know, parents, teachers, all stakeholders, how we come up with this information. And it should not be surprising to you that we very much use data to drive our decision making. One of the most important jobs that I have as the department coordinator of mathematics is to be able to put students in the correct course so that they are successful. We want students to be successful. We don't want students to be in a course that's too easy for them, where then they become bored. On the other hand, we don't want to put students in a course where it is over their head, and again, they don't have that prerequisite prior knowledge, so that they don't have the opportunity to be successful. So that, I think, is my most important job that I have in my role. And so we have been using data for over 10 years to be able to make these decisions. And after each year, we then take a look at the students to see what level they went in and how successful they were. And then we go back and oftentimes change the criteria or tweak it based on the success that we see of students when they move into honors or our accelerated pathway. So in 6th grade, it's heterogeneous grouping. All of the students are together, and as I mentioned, the standards call for the leveling to begin in 7th grade, and we have the 3 different levels. We have the honors level, the accelerated level, and then just the traditional mathematics class. The difference between the 3 has a lot to do with what they would experience as 8th graders. For those students that are in honors, they take Algebra 1 as an 8th grader as opposed to the traditional pathway of doing it as a 9th grader. So if you're in the honors class as a 7th grader, you are doing, instead of, quote, 10 chapters of mathematics, you're doing 16 chapters of mathematics. You're doing all of the grade 7 standards and about half of the grade 8 standards that don't necessarily involve algebra, so that you are prepared to take a full year Algebra 1 as an 8th grader. And then from there, you would be taking geometry honors as a 9th grader. The accelerated pathway and the 7th grade math pathway both cover all of the state standards that we're required to teach. The difference is that the accelerated moves at a faster pace and goes into a little bit more depth and higher difficulty problems that are presented to the students. But no matter what level you're in, you are always going to be covering all of the standards by the time you take the state MCAS test. So some of the factors that we use and have been using over the course of our time to determine who will be successful in the honors program has to do with the MCAS testing, their previous 2 years of testing, their 4th grade and their 5th grade, and we like to see the students being exceeding the expectations, which is the 530 plus level of MCAS. We do something that's called a Continental Math League test, and this happens over the course of the year 5 different times. They're these short 30-minute tests that have nothing to do with the current curriculum. It's nothing you prepare for, but they're these open-ended, thought-provoking, problem-solving type questions that we use as part of the contest as a learning skill, but also a way to determine the proficiency level for anticipated success for honors. We also do something that's called the New England Math League test that happens once a year, and that is a multiple choice 35 question test. Again, nothing that we prepare for, but it's a way to say, okay, outside of the traditional, here's the information, now let's review it, and then the next day we have a test. Let's see how much you've actually remembered and can apply over the course of a 1-hour test in this case. We also look at the term grades. We want to see students who are receiving an A in their 6th grade math class be successful going into honors. We also do 2 other things. One's a basic skills test. We want to make sure that you know how to add, subtract, multiply, divide, whole numbers, fractions, decimals, and you have a good working relationship with percentages so that you don't have to be worrying about those things if you're at the honors level. And then we do an honors placement test for every student to see what exactly they are ready, or what is their readiness level for algebra, so that they could be ready to take algebra as an 8th grader as opposed to when most students take it as a 9th grader. And finally, we always value teachers' opinions. They're the ones on the front line. They're the ones working with the students on a daily basis, so we want to get their recommendation. So we go through all of this, we meet together collaboratively, we analyze each student's results, and then we also learn about the student themselves by talking to the teacher, and we try to make an informed decision. After we go through this process at the 6th grade level, we have an opportunity for them to go through an override, just as we do at the high school level, where that's an opportunity for students and or their parents to say, we don't agree with that decision. And when that happens, they go through a process where they speak with the teacher, they write a letter to me describing why they think they're not in the correct level, and then we reanalyze it and meet with the parents to talk about why we think the decision was correct, or maybe we accept the override based on some factors that we learn about when we go through this. We want it to be a collaborative process with the students, the parents, the teachers, and then me as the department coordinator. But again, I go back to the idea of what I think is my most important job in the district, which is putting all students in a position to be successful with mathematics. And then the third category that I wanted to share a little bit about is the idea of what we're proposing to do with levels at the high school. Principal Murray will be speaking with you in a few minutes to talk about the leveling idea at the high school, but I want to take some time and focus on just the mathematics, what it would look like both from the aspect of leveling and for courses under this approach. What we currently do, as you can see on the slide and in your handouts, is we have kind of a organized mess, if you will, for our courses, where many people don't necessarily understand it, because although we have 3 levels of mathematics, we technically have a 3B level, another level, which is our Intro to Algebra and our TAG, where we take our concepts and we go at an extremely slow pace, and we also offer the co-teaching in these particular courses. Well, what I have done, in addition to the other department coordinators, is I began to survey other schools, other districts, to find out how many levels that they have for math and what is their offering, and how do we best support not only the struggling students, but the students who are exceeding expectations in mathematics. And what I found is that every district except for one has limited themselves to just 3 different levels. Now, what you're going to hear from Principal Murray in a few minutes when he does his presentation is about the movement to 2 levels at the high school for everything except for the mathematics. Because mathematics is a little bit of its own animal in both the way that it's instructed and what the standards call for, we are moving from having 2 different level 3s to moving it now to just having levels honors, college prep, and then the level 3. And one of the benefits that I believe this will provide for our struggling students is that right now all of our struggling students are put into this Intro to Algebra pathway, which now moves into the TAG, or transition from algebra to geometry classes. And then many times these students feel as though they're put in this class because they're not the smart kids or they're not good at math. And that's very much against what I talked to you about earlier about that growth mindset, where we believe every student has the ability to be successful. So in reviewing the process and how we do things at the high school level, I felt as though that by having that level 3B was very much a fixed mindset. This is where we put the kids who really don't do well in math. Instead, I believe that with the proper support that I and the special education teachers and co-teachers can provide, every student can be successful in mathematics and can take an Algebra 1 course in 1 year, a geometry course in the 2nd year, and then an Algebra 2 course in their junior year. And then after their junior year, there's a variety of other options. And so instead of this mess that kind of works for me now but doesn't necessarily work for everybody, we are proposing a little bit more of a traditional pathway where every student will be able to be successful doing Algebra 1, Algebra 2, and algebra and geometry by the end of their junior year, and also giving students an opportunity to take pre-calculus if they desire it, even if they are on that level 3, pathway, if you will. But every student can be successful. So we are proposing to be able to do this, not only to support the struggling students, but to keep the rigor of our honors and our AP program so that students who graduate from Chelmsford High School will go on to college, be it a 2-year, 4-year, or trade school, and be able to say that they were able to not only learn the mathematics, but understand it in a conceptual manner and be able to apply it to whatever field, whatever course of study they determined to go to after they finish their time within the Chelmsford Public Schools. And so that's the proposal that I have moving forward for the pathways at the high school. So at this point, I'm going to be available for questions or cross-examination based on any of these 3 ideas that I have shared with you this evening.
Donna?
Yes, I was curious, who develops your basic skills test and your aptitude test?
So that has been developed by our middle school math coach, Donna Foley, and she designs it, and then it's based on also feedback of both me as well as the teachers at the 6th grade level.
Okay, so it's based something internal that we do.
Internal, yes.
And then on a yearly basis, how many overrides do you think are requested?
For the 6th grade going into 7th
I would
grade,
say just across the board.
across the board, maybe 40.
Okay, and how many are granted?
I mean, it varies year by year, but I would say about maybe half.
Okay, thank you.
Anybody else? Questions?
You didn't talk too much about the AP level. How are we there on the AP level for math?
So the reason I didn't spend much time talking about it is there's no proposed changes to that. We're keeping our AP calculus course, both the AB and the BC level, and we also have the AP statistics, and both are very strong programs and very well enrolled.
Okay, any other questions? Right, great.
Yeah.
Well, thank you
Matthew,
very much.
Well, I think I did an
Yeah,
excellent job, so
Did
thank you so
excellent
much.
job.
Thank you so much.
Voted
Except for the
outstanding.
clicker.
Yes, I appreciate it. Yes, except for the
Leave-
clicker.
Yeah, leave the clicker.
All right, thank you.
All right, thank you.
Have a good night.
All right. Next up, Chelmsford High School Principal, Mr. Murray, is going to present on some of the activities that are happening at the high school.
Hello.
So give us 1 second to just get him changed
no
out.
problem.
Oh, is your clicker good now?
It's done.
Okay, we're changed out.
Make sure,
So
can
welcome,
you do a
Steve.
test? Testing 1, 2, can you go up and down?
I think you have to click that one down.
Now you're putting the
The volume.
volume on. There you go.
There we go. All right.
Take it back.
I just ruined the surprise.
Not out.
I know. So welcome. So again, Steve is here this evening. We had to push this presentation a couple of times just because of meeting cancellations and whatnot. But Chelmsford High School is going to present tonight on some of their activity that's taken place and a couple of hot topics there. So welcome,
Sure.
Steve, and please take some time to walk us through it.
Excellent, thank you. So we have some exciting things going on at the high school, but also some things we need to talk about and some questions people have. And the one I'm really excited about is dual enrollment. That is something that Dr. Lang and Dr. Hirsch brought here with a partnership with MCC. And so for the viewers out here, what is dual enrollment? It's basically programming with high school students to enroll in college courses to get college credit. And as I said, it's a partnership with Middlesex Community College, and we'll be going into our 3rd year next year at that. And the goal for the dual enrollment classes is for kids, excuse me a second, for our H2 kids, which is give them the opportunity to get college credit as an option. And the minimum requirement for that is a 2.0 on it for the GPA. And this is a really huge benefit for students and families. I've had peers in other districts who've offered this, and I know parents who've raved about it. Oh, thank you. So students can see what college courses are like without being overwhelmed, and they do so within their own environment with their own instructors that they have a familiarity with. It makes that transition from high school to college easier, and also I'll talk a little bit later about pathways. It'll make that transition from high school to the career world, if you're not going to go to college, easier as well. A lot of kids can sample different classes before they go to school and start paying big dollars for it. And these are really for students who are not on the AP route right now, which is the AP, they get their credit from colleges. We're trying to offer something different for kids who are at a different level. And overall, as I said, that these credits they get will apply to colleges, not just MCC, but other state schools as well, and the flexibility is wonderful. And it saves students and families money. Imagine getting some of your gen eds out of the way before you get to school. That's just a wonderful resource for parents. It's also it's a nice benefit for the teachers. Each CHS teacher who teaches the dual enrollment is going to get a mentor from MCC. They'll receive professional development with their mentors at MCC. They'll have full access to all the resources at MCC, and they'll get adjunct pay as an adjunct professor to do this with their training. The cost for a student is $92 per credit, so it's $276 basically, and that is a steal. If any of you have kids who are in college, that's a steal for that, especially if, as I said, it applies to any state schools. Our dual enrollment offerings, we've had in 2018 and 19 on the right-hand side, we had 5 classes with 58 students participating. This year, we expanded to 12 classes with 461 students participating. And then next year, we're proposing some classes to expand it up to 20. We want to add 8 more. And so the proposal of that is a retail marketing management class, modern world literature, legal rights, physics, anatomy and physiology, and forensic science. I think the kids are going to get really jazzed by this. I think this is a good offering there. So this is, and as we said, we'll expand this. We have, some of these classes will have to get approved by MCC. We don't see there's a problem with that. But, and then as we'll have more and more, I'm sure, teachers jumping on, and you'll see the numbers increase with 12 and 461, 20 classes, the numbers will go even larger. The second thing is very exciting. I know we talked about this back in December or November. We talked about our senior Capstone pilot project, and this is our pilot year. As we said back in November, it's April 6th to the 22nd of May. And this is a time, it's a 6-week period for our seniors can pursue an internship, a research project, community service. They can investigate a future career or major during this 6-week time. They can make connections for summer work, because sometimes summer work is hard to find. They can use these skills they're learning in new settings, skills they're learning in the high school, as well as skills they're learning in their internship. It's also time they can volunteer for an organization and learn about a topic they might have wanted to learn more about, maybe they had the time to do so. As we mentioned, there are 2 types of internship or capstone activities. One is the internship itself. It requires it's 30 hours for the week there. There's also a community service aspect in there. One thing we are telling the kids is making sure this is not an extension of if you have a job in the afternoon, it doesn't mean you're going to do it in the daytime. So we have little safety nets in there to make sure we're guiding the kids in the right place in the right way and that. There's, and as we said, some examples which they can do some internships. It's local schools, which we already have already. So marketing firms, nursing, dentists, there are endless possibilities. And then for community service, the community's always looking for community service. And we have an unbelievable resource in terms of our kids. They do so much community service with the guidance of our teachers. It goes on that you really don't hear a lot about, but they're already invested. And what a way to do it in a more organized manner. I know the Senior Center, the Humane Society, there are so many they can get involved in. And as I said, our schools we've been talking to have been a great help with us in terms of resource. I won't go through all this, but this is some of the important dates. This February 14th is when kids have to turn in applications, and it's a pilot year. We'll probably get about 15 to 20 per house to do it, so maybe about 50 to 60 is our pilot year. And the only thing's mandatory in here for this, obviously, is the hours they put in, but they must come to the senior capstone meeting on the 3rd. And at the very end, which is the one I get excited for, we did this in my previous high school, the exhibition, where students will kind of talk about their experience, what was the joy they got from it, what did they learn from it, and then perhaps what do they want to do from here, given the knowledge they've learned in the last 5-6 weeks. That was what I loved the most. It was that exhibition in my last district, because you got to learn a lot. And as I said at the meeting in November, one of the girls, I remember Sophia, she wanted to be a CPA, her uncle's an accountant, et cetera, and she did it, and she had a great time, and then she said at the very end, I was bored. I love the people. I do not want to be CPA. And I understand she's in marketing, from what I understand now. So we have the dual enrollment, we've talked about the senior capstone, and now this Pride Block. This is the controversial one. And so we'll talk about what is Pride Block and Flex Block, et cetera. So what we had is several years ago, I want to say 7, 8 years ago, the NEAS came in, they talked about adding supports for students during the school day. Kids are very scheduled. It's tough to have them stay after school. And so can we provide a time for kids who are struggling, those who are not meeting the expectations? And the idea was for those students, maybe C's, D's, not passing, to take advantage of that time, which at that time was Wednesday in the morning, the first block. If you didn't need that extra help, you didn't have to come in. And if you did, the teachers are there for you, and the teachers are wonderful about that. After about 2 years, we started looking at this, and we noticed a couple things. One is our parking lot was empty. The juniors and senior lot was empty, so they were not coming in. Our freshmen and sophomores were coming in because they had a bus. They were captivated, they had to come in. But if you did statistics in our school, only 20% of our classes had some kind of academic work going during that flex block. And of the 20% of the classes, only 18% were the kids that we were looking for, the F, D, and C students. So the ones we were looking for weren't coming. The ones who were doing really well were the ones who were there. And then it became a kind of a liability issue for administration because we were having kids get dropped off in the front and sneaking out the back to Drum Hill and then coming back after their breakfast. And that is something that we just did not want to have happening. They're going across Drum Hill, whether they're walking or what, it's not safe. And so we said, we don't want to throw it all out. We want to still provide that in-school support. And so one of these we came up with Pride Block. And so Pride Block is now where Flex Block was once every Wednesday in the morning. Pride Block is now twice a week. It's Tuesdays and Thursdays for about an hour. And so with Pride Block, one of the things we talk to students about, and students either love it or they don't. One of the things they wanted, they said they didn't like Pride Block. What they would like to have instead is some downtime. Down where they can relax. Well, I can't do that. By state mandates, we can't have study halls or downtime. It must be some directed learning. So the kids, we have two choices. We could either do a form of Flex Block, which is Pride Block, which is provide them time in the day, or I could take that time, not do it, and just put it back into the other classes, so they have a little longer classes. Overwhelmingly, some of the survey did the kids of those two choices, and if we gave them the first choice, it would be downtime. But of these two choices, 91% said, well, they'd like to have a Pride Block. So now, but we're doing some adjustments. So Pride Block, as I said, so what is it goes on in Pride Block? Pride Block is directed help. So you go to the teacher, and this is what I need help in. It's also time for group work. Group work's hard. Trying to get kids after school together is very difficult. I know, remember, as a teacher, it's hard, especially if kids aren't driving. It's even more difficult. Directed learning time, that could be a time where, hey, I need to study, I'll be with an adult, but I just need some help. And so that's some directed learning time. It's a time to practice. It could be for some of our arts or music. It could be a time for makeup labs, et cetera. It's a time to get caught up as well as other things. That's the main parts of Pride Block. So how does it work? What we've been doing right now is we're having teachers schedule their Plus Block teachers are scheduling all their students into a Pride Block. So every Tuesday, Thursday, they have somewhere to go. And what's great is some of the teachers are saying, hey, I need this. I need Mr. Doherty in my class right now, and they'll schedule you in. And now you have a captive audience because it's in the middle of the day. The kids can't come late. They can't leave early. They have a captive audience, and they're being assigned. Students, we talk to students, they would like a little more flexibility themselves. They'd like the ability to schedule themselves, and that's our next step, which we're going to be starting next month. So we're using Enriching Students as a software where kids can go in and they can assign themselves. Hey, actually, I don't want to see Murray today. I want to see Mr. King, and they'll assign themselves there. So our next step is having a kind of a hybrid where students are going to assign themselves, and then the Plus Block teacher will overlook to make sure they're in there. And it won't be perfect. We're gonna hit some bumps on the way, but this way we're going to give some kids the choices themselves on where they want to go and what they need. And that Enriching Students is the software that Bill Silver's was so good helping us with. That's a real scheduling software that really makes it all happen. I know like Lexington uses that, Andover does, and so now what about Plus Block? So we are still having Plus Block. That's 3 days a week. That's Monday, Wednesdays, and Fridays, and that's for a half hour. That's basically almost like your advisory block where we will still have our house meetings And it's a time where our students are making a relationship, having a relationship with another faculty member within the building. And that's one of the real hallmarks of Plus Block, is making sure that every student has someone in the building they know, someone who knows them. So we're still gonna have Plus Block 3 times a week, but we're doing Pride Block twice. We did last year a pilot of Pride Block, and it was 3 days a week, and that became much. It was a lot for teachers, and it was a lot for students too. And then, so our hope is to go through the spring and see, and get some feedback from students, especially seniors, because they don't have a dog in this race, and so they're gonna let us know how they feel, and then we can make adjustments for there. But we don't wanna get rid of that in school time support. We wanna make it work and see how we can make it work, because this is just a different iteration of that in a different way. Want me to take questions at this stuff or at the very end? Or, I don't know.
Anybody have any questions at this point?
Steve, with the dual enrollment, they do it at the high school, after school?
Yes, so yes, correct. So there's two ways of doing dual enrollment. In my previous school, the students went out. They went out to the school. Ours, they come in, which is more common, which is becoming more common because a lot of students have rotating schedules, and if you leave, you're gonna miss a lot. So maybe in the future, is one of the things we're looking at dual enrollment. Stephanie Quinn, the social studies coordinator, John Morris, the science coordinator, and Dr. Bobby Lyons, Emerson House dean. They met with Ellen Grandine from MCC and her counterparts to talk about, could we do some more pathways in the way that Dr. Hirsch and Dr. Lang had talked about. As we build these classes and dual enrollment and increase it, can we create pathways so kids, when they come in freshman year, they leave with an associate's? And as Ellen said, we're gonna be having a teacher shortage in many years. We're already seeing that in certain subject areas. Wouldn't it be great if we get kids in a pathway now into that? Or for any other, what I call a profession or major. So we'll be increasing that. And so with that, we might have an opportunity, we have to look at our schedule, because we might have to adjust our schedules. We might want to provide opportunities for kids to go to those colleges to take the classes. We're gonna, as we go, we're gonna put together. We talked today at our coordinator meeting, getting together about a scheduling committee to say, all right, once this gets underway fully, what do we need to do to make it even more successful, so it's a benefit for students and it's not a heartache on teachers.
Can I just jump in for 1 second?
Sure.
It's not before or after school at the high school, it's the actual courses that the kids are taking during the day.
Oh, you said before or after?
So-
I apologize. I didn't hear
You
that
know,
right.
just because, so it's our actual courses. We actually go through a process of having the course be approved through, say, Middlesex Community College. It has to meet the rigor, it has to have a syllabus that matches a certain content area. So our kids are actually, during the regular school day, just electing to take this course that they're getting Chelmsford High School credit towards graduation for, as well as earning credits at Middlesex. So it's not before or after, it's actually just part of their school day.
You're
And
thinking the block schedule.
they have it as an extra
Do it.
class.
Well, where I am at National Community College, the kids come to us. So I have in my new class like 3 kids
Right.
from the Nashville schools.
What's difficult for us, as Steve mentioned, where we have the rotating schedule, you can't commit to being off-site for any particular time. This actually, when I was in Lowell, because Middlesex was so close, we had a lock schedule, so kids literally would walk over to Middlesex, or they might even go to UMass Lowell for a course. When Lowell went to a flip schedule, similar to Chelmsford's, we ended up doing classes in the school, just because it makes it a little bit easier. So our teachers are actually serving as adjunct faculty and teaching the courses right during the block.
So it takes the place of another class they take in their schedule.
Well,
Yeah,
it's
well,
our
it's an
classes.
it's
their
our
actual
class, it's one of our
So if
classes,
you're taking
yeah.
sociology,
Right.
for example, it's a dual enrollment class, that class would count towards dual enrollment, plus their high school requirements.
So,
Thank you.
in terms of that, what's the impact of having these 400 and so students do this year? Do you see any impact on the AP level courses? Do you see that students are taking one versus the other more? What has been the impact?
Well, right now, we've only offered it for H2, so we haven't seen that yet, and it's only in our second year, and so it'll be our honors classes. So we haven't seen it, because we want to offer, as we said earlier, we want to offer opportunity for the honors kids to have the same opportunity that the AP would, because the AP, they can get college credit. So how can we give it to the kids in the middle? It's like the middle child. I'm a middle child, sometimes you get forgotten. So hopefully, we're focusing in the middle.
May I just jump in for a minute? So you have to understand, for AP, you can either use one or the other. You can't go to a college with
That's right.
both dual enrollment and then asking for AP. the piece for dual enrollment is that it is college credit. So AP may waive a class for you to then replace it with something else, and you still need to make those credits.
Good point.
If you were to take it as dual enrollment, it's automatically accepted with the credits, so that the student is not having to have to replace it with another one to get the extra 3 credits or 4,
Okay.
depending on the college. So you use one or the other.
So when do we actually provide all this information to the students when they're transitioning over to the high school? We're starting to provide this information? Because I can see that certain students might choose one path versus the other and so on, so.
Great question. So last year, they weren't unable to do it, but this year they can. So MCC is going to come to our 8th grade parent night. And so,
Okay.
and then we'll be sending information, literature out to parents for grade sophomores and juniors and seniors after that when we come. It's all part of the scheduling process. So she's going to come and talk to our parents. She'll have a table set up for her, so and parents can ask, and she can give a lot of information. Last year, they were unable to. This year, we were able to schedule it so they could. So I'm really excited by that.
Okay, great.
And how is the program being received by the teachers? I mean, are we having any trouble getting teachers to buy in?
I think
or
the
to-
first part, because it's new.
Yeah,
I think it was new. So it's catching on. So it's going well. But it was new because we didn't know that the first time we did it, we came in toward the end of the spring. So it was an adjustment And this year, as you said, we got up to 12, and next year we have 20 because we have some teachers who already want to do those other 8 classes. So yeah, it's expanding. It's going well.
So
I have a great staff, so it's really fortunate.
on Pride Block, at the beginning, I will tell you that I heard several comments that were very negative about it, the change and so on. More recently, actually, I think some students have grown to like it, and to have that ability to have that time, and you guys can speak to it too, yourselves, but this is what I'm hearing, even from my own two that go to the high school. And that's good. The flexibility part, I'm glad to see you considering that and allowing them to make more choices and to go in there and list themselves in, because I don't know, are they allowed to go to more than one teacher during that block? Is it only to one right now?
Right now, it's only one, so, but sometimes the teachers can have some conversation on their own, so they can kind of share each other. So that's one of the pieces we're working on, and that's
That's
the
great.
feedback we got from kids about that as well.
As you're getting the feedback, I'm glad to see you two, you're considering the
Yeah.
feedback and you're
Yeah.
trying to modify that. That's great.
No, that's great. Thank you.
Any other questions on
That's
either
me.
dual enrollment or? Okay, all right.
I think it's great.
And then the next one, level 3, is what Dr. Baranova had talked about, level 3 changes. So what does that mean? So level 3 changes, the way we currently have, we have AP, then there's honors, there's H2, which is weird, I don't know, no one really knows what H2 is, and then we have level 3. And so what we're doing is we're gonna combine level 3 and H2. And then, so we'll call that it's a college prep, CP, which is what a lot of schools do, CP. And then we'll go over the philosophy and why, et cetera. So one of the things we're saying is that we've had level 3 for many years in this model we've had. We've known from our accounting and MCAS area, it's not working to the degree we need it to. We found out recently that some of our kids are either partially meeting or not meeting grade level. In addition to it, they're in that level 3 all 4 years. They rarely ever get out of it. And the way I look at it, if I go to a job and I have no ability to move up or change, I'm not gonna get a lot of satisfaction out of that job. And I can't imagine if you're in level 3, you're not finding success, and you're gonna find the next 3 years in school the same. And if the results, which what the state is showing our data showing that there's an achievement gap in there, that's why we're not closing enough, then we do have to address it. We have to do something differently. We also know that there are many schools around us who've already gone in this direction. They've already reduced the number of levels we have. We're not reducing all our levels. For instance, elementary is all one level. Middle school, for the most part, other than math, is pretty much all one level. We're still going to have 2 or 3 levels above that. We're combining the level 3 and the H2. I really do believe that students, and I know this when I was at my second middle school, it was a change for me. There was all heterogeneously grouping, and I was not used to that. But the kids do. Kids learn from the diversity within the classroom. They learn from the diversity of knowledge and experiences in there. And if you just have the same group with you at all times, you're not going to expand and grow. So I am a big advocate for that. We already have many classes in our school already that are unleveled. We have a lot of our English classes at the senior level. We have a lot of other departmental classes that are unleveled. We also believe that whether you believe in the philosophy of it, whether you believe in the benefits of it, the one thing that's pushing us is compliance, and that's the state. And right now, we're at the point in our classes, we're at the point where when you have 50% of your kids in a class with an IEP, 50% or more, an IEP, that's called a sub-separate classroom. And right now, we're at that. And when it's a sub-separate classroom, if you have kids in there, whether with an IEP or not an IEP, who don't require a sub-separate classroom, we're violating their rights of an education and a free and appropriate education. One way to get around that is add more level 3 kids. I don't have that. I don't have the ability to make more sections of level 3, so we have less than 50% in a class. It's just not possible. And so, or I can, but it's a very expensive model. Then I'll have to add more teachers to teach smaller groups all the way through. And I don't think we're at that. And I don't know why we would get it at the high school, but not at the other levels. So what we're doing here is we're kind of being consistent. It's going to be a transition, but not as much as middle school and elementary. Middle school and elementary, they have a wider spectrum of kids within their classroom at different ability levels. With, as I said earlier, we still have other levels above. This year is going to hopefully be consistent with what other schools around us are doing. 2, it'll give the kids a better opportunity to keep moving forward and up, and also learn from their peers. And so this is the change we're proposing for next year in terms of level 3. And as I said, depending on what goes on here, we will talk about this to the parents and say our next steps, because obviously we have not told parents yet, we need to tell you first. Any questions on that?
I'm curious as to why we're calling it college prep and not college and career prep, because we still have so many kids who they're not sure if college is for them, okay? And they may want a career. And I think when we just say college prep, it sends the wrong message that, this is the track and that's the only track for you. And, you may have a desire to become an electrician, but have chosen a traditional high school model and choose to pursue something after. So why are we not thinking about it that way?
So it's a very good question. We did CP because we're trying to be consistent with the schools around us and what admissions are used to getting. I know, for instance, for us, H2, no one really knows what H2 is. Right. Is it honors or? Right. Right. So the CP is what a lot of schools around us have done, and that's what we're just trying to be consistent. But that's something we can talk about with our counselors and see what their experiences are with their admissions of universities and colleges.
Yeah, absolutely.
Yeah,
like
we don't want to penalize a kid because people don't understand what we're doing.
Right, and like I said, I want to make sure that every child feels supported in terms of, what their future goals may be. And then I just had a couple other quick questions.
Sure.
All right, maybe not really quick.
You say that's the problem.
They can be quick. Don't worry about it.
So we're moving we're combining the level 3 and moving it with the level 2. Okay, and I understand about the compliance only too well. My concern is, what kind of support are we offering to the teachers? Now, the reason I ask that is because when you're looking at, combining these, I'm wondering, are we providing the teachers with the kind of training that they're going to need in terms of content, pacing, differentiated instruction, classroom management, all of these kinds of things?
Sure.
And what is the plan for the rest of the year in terms of, as we roll this out, the type of support that we're going to be able to provide for them and the training that we're going to be able to provide?
Sure. So what we're going to do is to allow teachers to help make this adjustment. We're going to be taking some of our faculty meeting time, some of our early release time, and then our pride block time. I'll explain that in a second, where it's teachers who teach similar classes can get together and talk about the assessments and talk about what they want to bring together and make work. We're going to take pride block time, where we'll take certain groups of teachers. We already said we spoke to the faculty about some dates they want to meet with their peers, and we'll block these teachers out during pride block where they can work together on that as well. And then we can talk about bringing people in for differentiation, et cetera.
What was the consensus from the staff? I mean, did they feel that this was a good idea, beneficial to the students? Is this something that,
I think it's split. There are people who firmly believe that level 3 is needed and we should have level 3. And there's others who believe they're kind of a mix. I know from my standpoint, it's tough trying to find teachers to teach level 3. That's not always one that teachers are sought after. They don't want, so that's hard in itself. Not everywhere, in every place, but that is an issue.
do you know why they don't want to teach level 3?
Sometimes they say maybe because of the kids, the population, maybe the classroom management. Some just like the curriculum at a different one. There's different reasons for it. But I just know that at the middle school and elementary level, for the most part, you teach who come to you, and you don't have a choice. So I think we need to be consistent.
I know that
with
only
as
too
well.
well. Yes, I agree. But I also think that the training, and as I
Sure.
said, and the support.
Yep,
And
I
I
agree.
think that, so I do think with any initiative that we try to put in place is that I think it's important to make sure that we have the support of the staff. Because they're the ones that are gonna ultimately help,
Sure.
the students to be successful in this transition and in this process. And I feel that if they're not being supported and receiving the proper training, then it's not going to unfold well, and the students will end up suffering. And I guess my concern, from here on out is, well, I understand this, I do get worried, and I think we received a very eloquent letter from Rob Russo, the union president, and I think that teachers are feeling somewhat beleaguered by the number of initiatives that we're trying to put forward. I mean, I just was, thinking about, it's only been 2.5 years since my daughter graduated from high school, and I think about all the initiatives that have come forward. I find it exhausting as a teacher. I think about all of these initiatives that we've put forward in the 2.5 that she's been out of high school. It's been a lot. And I wonder if we need to be more thoughtful about the initiatives that we're putting forward. Like, what is the plan? I feel like it's a lot that we kind of pile on teachers. And just, pride blocks, standards-based report cards, the whole SEL thing, ELL, the new MCAS scoring. Do we have a comprehensive curriculum plan for how we're rolling things out and how we're communicating that with our staff so that it isn't so, as I said, overwhelming, on a year-to-year basis? And, just as an aside, I feel like sometimes, too, is that we don't let some of these initiatives run long enough to make sure that they've kind of settled in and people are comfortable with them before we add another one. And I speak as a person who has a drawer full of initiatives that, kind of collapsed after a period of time because they just really never had the time and the support from the staff and the administration to really see how well that they were going to work. I understand that's a little bit different here, but I do worry about that going forward, and I do wonder what our plan is. And maybe it will roll into our strategic plan as well, so.
Do you want to let everyone speak and then I can talk? I don't know.
Jeff, you want to?
I was at the high school when we eliminated the level 4s. And we, as if I remember, and my memory's not the best, we didn't get the kind of professional development we needed. And I had been a level 4 teacher and a level 3 teacher, and the principal at the time just said, we're doing this, and good luck. We'll see you in September. And those were smaller numbers. I mean, the level 4s were smaller classes, but you still had the mix. And as Donna said, it's really important that they get the professional development and the support, because if it doesn't work, if they're not prepared, and if they don't feel like they're supported, well, it's not going to work. My other question is, what about compliance with math if they're keeping level 3? Will they be in the same situation of 50%?
So we do not have that issue right now. Well, I should take it back. In our co-teaching, yes, we do have the issue where the numbers, and so that's one reason we have to separate that, correct? So we are addressing that with math as well.
And when you say co-teaching, you're talking about one gen ed, one special ed teacher?
Exactly.
Just so okay.
Yeah, so there's, all our subject areas are having that problem with the level 3 with some of the IEPs are over 50%. So we have to address that.
So would that mean you'd have to add more level 3 math classes to keep the numbers down?
No, that's when you combine level 3 with the H2, it is more sections for the kids to go into.
But Matthew said that we're keeping level 3 for the math.
Correct.
Right.
Eric.
Yeah, but they had another level below
Yeah,
that, so you would
also,
see your
okay.
co-teaching happening there, so you would see that non-compliance piece at that fourth for lack of a better thing, a fourth level, that he was calling it a 3B, Matthew,
Right.
when he came and presented it. So now if that gets bootlegged up, which is gonna be the case, then now you've opened it up, so you would not have as many students with, an IEP in a classroom. You have more sections to be able to feather out. And based on what's in their IEP for co-teaching, you'd work with the special educators to put that piece in. There was also, just to give some historical context, so at middle school for grades 7 and 8, we leveled them for English. I was one of those teachers, we did our ups and downs, and then we collapsed the levels so they're not leveled at all. Same kind of thing, it's always the fear. I mean, I was probably one of them being like, what am I supposed to do? You know, but it's a matter of, it takes a little time, you have to really look at your syllabi to think of it as an elastic, you know, because that's kind of what we do for our pacing. It's not as if students are not going to receive an education, it's just at the pace. So it's a matter of adjusting that pacing, and then what does it look like for a more of a heterogeneous group. And your H2s already, I believe, kind of have that, because you've had some people that have gone for an override up if they weren't recommended, and vice versa. They probably should have been in a higher level, and the students didn't take that because they decided to go in an H class, maybe for another subject area. So those classes already have a little bit of that diversification happening in there. So it's gonna be applying that a little bit more, I think, bringing those kids in. The only other piece too is that, because one of the changes is we found that people were recommending students, not at the high school, I'm going back to the middle school, some of the criteria was behavior-based, I'll be honest with you. So you would have that third level at middle school, and it wasn't necessarily an academic thing. When I got to know the students and to see what they were doing, it was behavior, and then some students shouldn't have been together. So just a little background of middle school to high school, and some of the thought process, and I get it, like, people will be very nervous. However, fortunately, we do have, you know, a great staff, and people will work together, and we'll have to figure out those times that it's gonna work best.
And then just to clarify on H2,
Yeah.
it used to be just A. And what happened was the state colleges weren't giving our students the same amount of credit for an A-level class. So all we did was we called them H2, and then they were getting more credit at the college level because they saw it as another honors class. So that was just a name change to benefit the students when they were applying for school. And again, I think the key is, you know, the supporting the teachers and the professional development and the time, and I think that's going to be, because we didn't have that before. And in some cases, it wasn't pretty.
Sure, and I don't know how to say this being PC or not, but I also feel that moving from level 3 to H2 is gonna also help the teachers. It's very hard, I know from being a teacher, when you have a teacher of a class, let's say there's 18 in the class, we're making a number, and 12 of them have IEPs, teachers really believe, they really want to address the kids, they want to help them. Try to get 12 kids on an IEP and get to all their accommodations, things like that. That's a lot, and to do that for the 180 days, there's a burnout factor. So as we're looking at how we can help the students' experience, I also have to address the teachers. That's a lot of work.
But with that, but when you combine them, you'll be adding those special ed kids to classes level 2 where they're already out, but it will be spread out.
Exactly.
Yeah, I agree with you. I think it is a tremendous amount to manage 10 IEPs, because they're individualized. I mean, that's the way that they're
They're not
written.
cookie cutter.
Exactly, they are not cookie cutter at all. And to apply the accommodations as well as to be able to meet the goals is overwhelming. But I do want to make sure, like I
Sure.
said, and I can't, emphasize enough, also what Jeff said in terms of making sure the teachers are provided with the support that they need in order to be able to have it be successful for everybody. And this means not only the special needs kids, but also the general ed kids who want to be challenged in the curriculum as well.
Well said. Thank you.
So, yeah, couple of questions on this combination, because I've heard from some parents who think that H2 is just going away. There seems to be a combination here. H2 remains with a different name, but there is a difference here. And so I understand about, I agree with you 100% when you combine, it incentivizes people to keep growing and keep moving forward and so on. My concern is, and I think for some people, the concern is, those H2 students who are now being brought in with other students, what is going to be the additional assistance that's brought into a classroom, or the additional support that staff, teachers may have in order to make sure those kids may, the following year, want to move into a higher level course, level and so on. So in other words, we don't want to just level. We want to make sure that there's opportunity for teaching to all levels within that class, and continued growth for all of the levels. So what's the plan on that? Is there anything that we're bringing in as extra assistance? Is there more individualized planning in the classroom? What's it going to be in order to make sure that that really does take off? And I understand about the staff support 100%.
Yeah. So there's three components. The first one is what I mentioned. We're talking about providing time this year and during our early release days and our faculty meetings, as well as some pride block time for people to get together about that. We also look at bringing someone and talk about differentiation. And so we need to talk about that and how we bring someone in for that. We also, right now, Dr. Hirsch has put a lot of money forward with Susan Hentz as someone to bring in for co-teaching, talk about co-teaching, and she touches on that in terms of differentiation. And so that's been a big, you brought it in a couple of years ago, and we brought it in this year to working with all our co-teaching at the secondary level. So they've been very supportive in terms of working with classes that have a wider spectrum in there, and we're going to continue with that model, bringing some helping out with the PD as well as with the co-teaching, and then our in school time.
I just want to clarify, students on IEPs are in H2 classes, they're in
Yeah.
honors classes,
Yes,
they're
I
in
know.
AP classes, so they're not just pigeonholed into one class. So I just want,
Good
just
point.
for the general population, if everybody thought that, our students are in multiple classes, and a lot of it, where Chelmsford High, like, we're probably maybe used to, when we went to school, the old tracking method, like, everybody went into honors, and you stayed together, you held hands. Students get that opportunity, because there are a lot of students that may want to have one of the humanities as their honors or their AP, but they will stay, like I said, an H2 level, maybe for English, and they went for the honors for social studies. There's a lot of reading. That's why they might say, my passion is this way, or they may more be a STEM student, and they're going to take an H class or an AP class that way. So it's nice that they can pick it, and each year they can speak to their teachers and make that decision if they want to move up, move down, talk to their parents, obviously, so they're not stuck. But I also just wanted to make that point clear, that our students are in multiple classes.
Thank you, that's a good point.
And what are we doing this year? Because very soon, our students are going to be choosing what courses they want to take next year. I think in the next couple of weeks, right?
Yeah, the
Already?
students will start choosing right before verification
So,
and afterwards.
So what is the preparation with them? Have we already rolled this out, and students know about this, or how is that?
Sure. Our first step was to come to you first. First, we met as a group, ourselves, the coordinators, and et cetera. And then we spoke to the staff in December, if it was. And then the next step is here. And then after this, depending on the results of this, then the next one is information out to the teachers, and then obviously the parents, in terms of, this is what we're doing, this is the philosophy, this is why, and so it'll be a sheet going out to all of them. And then we'll talk about there in our house meetings as well.
Okay.
Yeah.
Kind of related to that, too, we also, along with our meeting pack, got a copy of the course selections. You know.
Oh, yes.
And in it,
Forgot about
it
that.
has AP, level 1, level 2, and level 3. Is that,
So we're gonna make that change. We're gonna make that change.
Yeah, I mean, it has to be there for two reasons.
Yeah.
One, your mathematics still has
Yeah.
that, and
Yeah.
I had a conversation with the high school that maybe perhaps in parentheses, it might just say specific departments. Also, in science, we had students that are in a sequence right now. They did biology 1, and they have to go to biology 2 because they're in that sequence. So after next year, that is gone. So you can't just take away from those students that are currently in a course sequence for science. So that will be there, but it would probably have to be in the program of studies, but maybe with an indication,
Okay,
you
yeah,
know,
I just didn't want it to be
asterisk.
confusing, people.
Yeah,
saying-
when I was looking at it the other day, I was talking about that, but, you know, that's an easy fix. That's an asterisk, that's a comma, could say mathematics only, but for next year, their bio two is still in place, so I wouldn't want to just say mathematics only, because it could be a little confusing for those students that are gonna be in bio two.
It's a great question. So it's similar to when we did the graduation requirements, we had to change to the wellness, where, so if you look at graduation requirements, there's an asterisk saying, for this grid, juniors and seniors, they're gonna be taking this because we changed wellness, and now they're gonna, I can't think of what I'm gonna say, but.
Donnie had one more question, or?
Yeah, the only thing I would ask you to consider is, I know we're looking at co-taught classes, and co-taught class, I mean, co-teaching is an art. I mean, it's a really difficult task. Another model that's pretty successful is instructional support in the class. So same thing, 2 teachers, but rather than use a co-taught model, offering either small pullouts for a brief period of time in order to be able to kind of review some concepts, or providing instructional support right in the classroom. It's a little bit different model than a co-taught model. And the only reason I say this is, while I have complete confidence in our teachers, as I said, co-teaching it's almost an art form. It's just that hard to do. It's an incredible amount of work and commitment on both of the teachers. And so it just may be something to think about down the road, in order to be able to offer support in those classes without actually going to a co-taught model.
Thank you.
Good.
No, I agree with the comments. I think a lot of this, just next year is gonna be a transition year, because it's not completely clean, as far as we do have some hangover classes that are gonna have to roll over and kind of finish out. I think a lot of this is gonna come to providing proper time and support for teachers and students as they make this transition. Dennis asked too about just the announcement. I think the guidance staff is gonna be critical when they're talking to their kids and they're helping them do their scheduling for the fall, to kind of know which track their student is in, and to help them along the way. But a lot really is gonna become, time and support on this. So I think that'll be the telling piece.
Can I ask just one more question? What does this do in terms of staffing levels? It stays the same?
Correct.
Balances out a little bit too.
Yeah, I think what you're gonna see is your classes are gonna be more balanced, number-wise.
Right, anybody, any more questions on any of this? All right, well, thank you for a very thorough report.
Steve, thank you very much.
Thanks for having me. Come in late tomorrow, don't worry about it.
He's on record now, it's on.
Thank you.
Good night.
Thank you.
Right.
No, good. All right, item number 4 this evening. The school committee had previously approved the calendar for the next school year, the 2021 school year. Nothing has changed. The religious holidays. I went through and I just defined all those dates. So we just want to put this back on the agenda. An email will be going out to parents and staff either tomorrow or Thursday, just with the posting to the website of the calendar for next year. But in talking to Dennis, just decided to put it on the agenda so it was back up, fresh in people's minds. So again, nothing has changed date-wise. I did just update the religious holidays. So they're on page 2, and this will be distributed publicly a little bit later on this week.
Great.
Okay.
Thank you, this is actually great. I like the way that it outlines what the expectations are for holiday observations as well.
I did a very good job with this one, Donna, thanks.
Evidence.
No, I do think this is good too. People really do like the format, and but we are going to start pushing this out to the public. So,
Right, and we'll get it on the website.
yeah, either tomorrow. Well, we're going to get it on the website, and then we're going to push the email message to kind of drive traffic to the website. So, yeah, we'll get that out there. Item number 5, I'm going to actually ask Joanna put together our second quarter financials for us. All in all, we're in very good shape, but I'm going to ask her to just kind of walk you through that particular report.
Do you want to do the budget?
Yeah, you missed a line.
What did I miss?
Budget calendar.
Oh, I'm sorry. Item number 5, I get so excited about what a good job I did on the item before. I missed an item there. So this is just the recommended budget calendar for this particular year. What I would recommend to you at this point in time, the town manager did his budget presentation to the Board of Selectmen last evening. So we're still on time, obviously, for a town meeting, which is going to come at the end of April. The Finance Committee will begin looking at department budgets probably within the next couple of weeks. and that will go right through March. We're typically a department that goes a little bit later in the process, so that gives us time to review page by page the budget and talk about our spending plan for next year. What I would propose to you at this point in time is, and I'm pretty much in line for this, to make a recommendation to you next Tuesday during our regular school committee meeting. That'll be the night that you actually get provided the budget with my recommendations around staffing and programs and services. We then in February have the February vacation week, so we typically don't meet that Tuesday. We bump it to the last Tuesday in February, which actually provides you an extra week to be able to read through the budget in detail, come up with any questions or comments that you have. And we would then post a public budget session on Tuesday, February 25th. So that would be an evening where individuals can come and ask questions about the budget, talk about different recommendations. We would actually begin a page-by-page review of the budget, again, asking questions and whatnot, and vote to approve the expenditures that I recommend to you. I note that we then meet the Tuesday after because of the way the calendar falls, so we meet on Tuesday the 3rd of March. We would actually just advertise that as a kind of a continuation night if we had anything to run over, or God forbid, a couple of years ago, we had a snowstorm at the end of February, so we had to bump the budget meeting until the 3rd. So we would post that as the date for the budget hearing continuation or the hearing based on inclement weather, because we do have to provide a notice to our town meeting reps, and we have to post in the newspaper our date. So we would post those 2 dates. But that's what I would recommend with you at this point. I want to just mention too, the budget is a living document. So, you know, we can go in, we can make alterations and edits over the course of the fiscal year. This will basically help kind of solidify what our plan is. To have a plan in place around March 1st really helps us in the hiring, because if we make recommendations towards personnel or services, it allows us to then get out early and actually try to recruit some great staff into the district to start for us for September. So it is timely that we actually look at it at this point of the year. And again, given the pretty consistency with the new Student Opportunity Act and the funding that's going to be coming to Chelmsford, the town manager's recommendation was an additional $2 million to the schools. I'll get into that next week when we do the full-blown presentation. But this is what I would recommend for your timeline.
Any questions?
Yes. What is the impact, what impact, if any, would the strategic plan, which we don't have yet, have on this budget proposal? So in other words, I really do think that you do a very good job with budget, okay? You didn't get a P- from me on budget, okay? Because you do a very good job with that. But I also think that it's very important not to just plan to budget, but to plan to what we actually want to accomplish, because we're gonna make it's like your household, you're gonna make some concessions if you have to in other things. So to me, that is important to know what our plan would be. So what's the timing for that? What are we thinking of in terms of that?
So we have a lot of, obviously, as we've been doing this, rolling out the strategic plan, we're at a point where it's taking us a little bit longer to get all the feedback that we wanted to inform the plan. But it is a plan we're gonna be putting in effect for 3 to 5 years, so we don't wanna come short at this point. We also found out along the way that the Department of Education was gonna be requiring each district to submit a plan to them by April 1st. So there was a meeting last week, the midwinter meeting, when the commissioner kind of laid out his requirements for districts. So we still don't have our regular requirement. We're going to hear very soon what it is. It was basically explained like there's a long form for taxes and a short form for taxes. So the long form is going to go to districts that are receiving a significant amount of money in funding. Unfortunately, we're not going to be receiving a lot of money under the Student Opportunity Act. We're going to be receiving the minimum aid contribution, which is about $30 per student. So that nets out to about $150,000 worth of additional Chapter 70 aid next year to us. So we're most likely going to be a short form district. But we still want to see what that, the elements of that report are going to be to line up against our strategic plan, because we don't want to have a plan document out there publicly for the strategic plan, and then a plan document out there for the DOE compliance, because I think what we're going to want to see is once we actually agree to a plan, every, say, 6 months or so, if we're having to produce a report for the DOE about our status and what we've actually accomplished, that would be just a great document to produce at the school committee to keep everyone in the loop on what's happening. So we basically have kind of pushed out our end date for our strategic planning to correspond with what we're going to have to submit for the state, the short form. And we're looking at closer to an April 1st timeline for that. So we're still, we actually completed, and I can do an update for you at the next meeting, but we completed our staff survey. We're now going through all that data to compile that. We have some meetings set up with schools to get some student feedback. That's happening this week and next week. So by the next time we meet, I will be able to provide you a little bit more definitive answer on that. The major components of our budget, and there's just a lot of fixed costs within our budget, aren't going to move. So I think I'm very comfortable recommending that. There may be a set-aside, again, I'm still formulating the budget, but there may be a set-aside for something that we agree to in the strategic plan that's just an earmark that needs to get flushed out even beyond April 1st. What's not going to change in all reality, or all likelihood, is our recommended bottom line. We know that our budget is going to go from $61 to $63 million. And what we have control over is that $63 million and how to spend it. But the vast majority of that $63 million is already tied up in personnel costs and fixed costs. So we're going to start going through that. And again, we're starting to take feedback that we received already. And you may see pieces of my recommended budget that are going to align to some of those recommendations. But I don't think anything's going to surprise you. I think these are recommendations about different staff or services that we've been talking about for quite some time. And what you're then going to see is how that's going to line up into both the short form and the strategic plan. And then ultimately, again, we're fixed to that $63 million, but we'll still have latitude and play within that budget on March 1st and April 1st and May 1st. So we can continue to tweak that document. It will be living right through the springtime. So that's kind of where we're at.
We have not received those forms from the state. They're due by the end of the month.
By the end of the month, where?
No, they're due by April 1st. They told us we were going to get
us.
An example of it, they told us last week, by the end of this month. Today's 28th.
I'm sure it's coming soon. But yeah, no, we don't have them yet.
Yeah.
All right.
Other questions on the budget?
So could we maybe have a motion to adopt these as our dates, and then I can post publicly accordingly?
I make a motion to approve, I'm thinking about it, hold on.
Budget timeline.
Just the proposed 2021
Yeah.
budget calendar and timeline as presented.
I make a motion to approve the superintendent's recommended 2021 operating budget on the dates as listed.
Calendar.
Budget calendar.
Budget calendar on the dates listed.
Perfect.
I don't feel like you were that impressed with that one.
Second.
That was very well worded.
We have a motion, a second. Any questions or any other corrections to the motion? Okay, all in favor?
Aye.
My fire alarm went off for an hour at 4 a.m. last night, so not with it.
5-0.
Great time.
All right, so now we'll actually move on to Joanna and her overview on the budget.
Calendar's a key piece of that.
What's that?
I said the calendar was a key piece of that.
I know,
motion.
sorry, the calendar, yeah.
Thank you. Included in your packet is a second quarter financial update. So it's July through December. There's a cover memo, and then there is a year-to-date budget report through December, which is also on the website and in your Dropbox. And in this packet, the grant and revolving fund summary and the summary of balances for the high school and each middle school student activity account. So we'll start with the operating budget of $61 million. Many of these variances we talked about in the first quarter because they're going to stay with us throughout the year. And then there are a couple new ones since the contracts have settled and we have a more definitive number on what the cost of living COLA increases were per employee and that type of thing. So we have a little more favorable variance. The first one is on classroom teachers, and that variance is $472,319 favorable. And the main reasons for this favorable variance are we settled the contracts, and you already did the budget transfers, putting that labor into the various different accounts were the teachers and the para salaries are charged. So we are going to be overall favorable in that salary reserve COLA account by $71,973. Again, that will stay with us through the fiscal year. The second favorable variance, and this one we already talked about, was for the lane changes. And that's when someone achieves a higher degree. We are going to be favorable in that category by $26,551. And again, that variance will stay with us through the fiscal year. And then the last one, we also kind of talked about last quarter. This is where some accounts have a favorable variance and some have an unfavorable based on what teacher filled a vacant position or if there was a transfer. And when all that is complete for the 400 and some teachers in the district, we're still favorable by $243,000. So those are the main favorable variances in that category. Can I keep going? And then the next major variance, and this one's just a little unfavorable, the other type of teachers, the specialist teachers, so this is special ed, reading, and ELL, we're slightly unfavorable by $10,337. And that's because we have that budgeted offset of $115,000 to the CHIPS revolving fund that will take at the end of the year. So once that offset is made, this category will become favorable too. That's the main labor variances. Then I'm going to skip to toward the end of the report, and this is the special ed tuitions. And right now it's showing as unfavorable on the report because we record all special ed tuitions in this one category, and then we transfer them to at the end of the year, the actual charges to the other funds that help support special ed out-of-district tuitions, such as circuit breaker and school choice. But right now, we had budgeted $6.65 million for special ed out-of-district tuitions, and that's cash out the door. And we have encumbered to this point a little less, $6.2 million. So we're actually a little bit under there. Once we take the second line, that's the circuit breaker offset. We're leaving that number alone right now at the $2.75 million, but we can adjust that as we get closer to the end of the fiscal year. The school choice offset of $175, we can adjust that too. We're leaving it in for now, but we may not need to take that depending on if we still come in favorable on the tuitions. But that Valley credit number is a firm number, the $131,468. And then staying on budget, on the budget book of the net to the local budget is that $3.593 million. The next chart is school choice. The balance there right now is $1.7 million. We'll still get that monthly revenue in from the Department of Revenue. Then we budgeted an offset to sped out-of-district tuitions, which I'm leaving in for now, but again, we don't have to take it toward the end of the fiscal year. And then this is just a reminder, we're funding the one-on-one initiative from this fund. So the 5 through 8 is $63,364 for those devices. That's a lease payment. And then we're going to have a new lease payment for grades 6 and 10. That's that $62,500. I don't know if you've seen those numbers yet because they've come in since last quarter. And then down below is the narrative. This hasn't changed on special ed tuition, circuit breaker, and the Valley credit. Any questions on the local budget before we move on to grants and revolving funds?
Just in the budget report, just the individual accounts, what does the asterisk mean next to some of the?
Oh, that's for the narrative to go down to. So like local account, the first asterisk.
No, I mean, if you get into munis report.
Oh, I'm sorry.
In the
itself,
munis budget
there's some
report.
like that have asterisks next to them and some of, just as I was reading through it.
When you look at the munis budget report on the far right column,
Yeah.
typically it's an account that technically, if I'm reading this correctly, is over budget. So like in the school committee line, where you have percentage used of the budget, 104%.
Yeah, it looks like once you hit 100, it gets a little
Yeah,
asterisk.
and some of the
It gives
hundreds
you a
have it,
little
some don't, that's why I didn't, that's why I originally thought, but then some of the hundreds didn't have it, so I didn't know if there was a, maybe it's a rounding up.
You might see a rounding in
99.98.
the computer somewhere,
Yeah.
because you've got some hundreds with it and some without it.
Right.
Like if I look at like the district-wide MIS account, you know, technically it's a negative 10 cents, just because of a, probably a payroll encumbrance issue. So that's flagging at 100%. Well, actually, yeah, this is a good example. So if you look at page 3 on the munis report, the MIS director salary technically has after the encumbrance, a positive balance of 2 cents, and that's 100%, there's no asterisk. But right below it, you've got a negative balance of a dime, and that one's triggering the asterisk. So it just means you've technically
Okay, so it's just a way to
exceeded the
keep track.
account.
Okay. While we're at that, can you just address the copiers? And, because they're, right now, they're a little over. What is different there that we're,
Yes.
Page.
first page of the munis today?
Yes, it's on, like, bottom of page 1, top of page 2.
Oh, yeah.
Right. So overall, the category is still favorable by 34,000, but we do have the encumbrance on here that 286,000, and that is to, our 5-year lease is up, so we had the decision to either lease again for a minimum of 3 years or purchase. And the way the math worked out, it was more favorable to purchase. So that's what that 286,129 is.
So not for this particular meeting, because we're not going to trigger going over, but probably at the next time we do a budget report, we would have a recommendation. We'll be able to kind of hone in and see exactly what might be over in that account, and we bring a recommendation to you for some type of budget transfer to cover that. In essence, as Joanna said, we previously had leased had a 5-year lease for copiers. Our copiers were in very tough shape, so we actually worked this past summer. We invited several vendors in to give us quotes and proposals and whatnot. We ended up deciding to make the decision to outright purchase the machines as opposed to lease them. I personally have always been preferable to purchasing. If you guys need to go, you have a good night. Okay. If you don't want to hear about photocopiers, you can go.
Thank you.
So we ended up purchasing the fleet of copiers. Under state contract, they're going to come with 3 years free maintenance, and then we'll own them. Will be a plan to manage them or whatnot. But they're all in now in the schools. People seem very happy with the new machines. In year 1, there is a slightly higher cost, obviously, because we paid for them instead of leasing them. But you're going to see a significant decrease in that budget line when we do the recommended budget, because we're no longer leasing. So now we're going to have several years of owning the machines, so you're going to have an offset there.
Great. Any other questions on the meeting budget? Right.
Thank you.
Great, thank you.
The next report is the grant and revolving fund summary. That's, the top portion is the entitlement grants. The middle portion is the kind of the other grant funds, the mainly private grants. The circuit breaker fund is in there too. And then the lower portion is the revolving funds, such as school nutrition, athletics. No one is in deficit, revenue's coming in as projected. Spend is in a smooth pattern, which lends to a good implementation plan typically. Any questions on the grants or revolving funds?
Anybody? Nope.
And then the last 3 reports are the student activity balances. So the high school, they're at $268,928. Again, that's all clubs and sports. And then McCarthy Middle School is at $31,628. And Parker is at $60,667. And then you can see the detail by club.
Just on the high school one, the class of 2019 has still $15,000. What happens to that money?
So the class of will decide,
Okay. So that was
And-
last year's class, though, right?
Right.
Last
Yep.
year's seniors, okay.
right? And I think we wrote in the policies, they have, I think we said a year to make a decision,
Okay.
so, we'll see.
Okay, I didn't know if there was scheduled for some sort of
Yeah, usually
project
the-
or gift, I didn't know.
Yeah, they'll make some recommendation, whether it be to, some goes to sometimes they do the Alumni Association, sometimes they contribute to maybe a sign.
Jeff's the class advisor, he looks like he knows.
I remember those days.
Yeah, for a sign, or athletics, they did some
Okay.
banners, yeah, so it's up to them, yeah.
So they have like a year to decide on it? Okay, great.
I have a question. I know that we're putting together that working committee on the plateau, and I was wondering, how are we doing on our current paying back of the turf fields that we already have? Are we on schedule for being able to make our payments?
Yes, so we have the bond payment and then the interest payment. The bond payment is due in May, and that's $80,000 a year, and then the interest payment has come down. I think we're at, let's say like $14,000 a year or something. I'd have to, well, maybe I might be able to tell.
That's in the grant revolving fund.
Yeah.
I see it. Are we
Oh.
gonna be able to make that 80,000?
Yeah, because we're gonna get the 25,000 of revenue for the turf field sign there coming up. And then Dan Hart is working hard on collections from turf field rentals from the
Do we have
fall.
a lot outstanding?
No, they just need reminders, and get that.
That's a very nice
Just a
way of putting it.
Get that revenue in. He'll let me know if
Do we
he
have a lot
need-
outstanding?
if he needs me to step in and help. But yeah, it'll make the payment, and we're never gonna build up hundreds of thousands, in reserve but we'll make the payments and enough for maintenance and that.
Anybody else, questions on the accounts? All right, well, thank you.
Thank you. The next one's my budget.
Yep, the next one's Joanna's too.
Yeah, so this is just one budget transfer, requesting your review and approval. The Social Studies Department would like a budget transfer of $2,794.54 from their textbook accounts to their supply accounts to purchase these maps for a fourth grade curriculum. So,
Take a motion.
I make a motion to recommend the school committee vote to approve this FY20 local operating budget transfer for, as presented. That's how it was written.
Second?
Any questions on the transfer? Okay. John?
Aye.
Maria?
Aye.
Jeff? Donna?
Aye.
Aye, 5-0.
thank you.
Thank you. Next item this evening, I'm going to ask Linda to give us a little report. If you recall, when Kelly was in, we did a presentation on the reading programs and whatnot. There were just some questions about the new, whatchamacallit, the assessments.
Assessment, yep.
Systems that we were using. So we asked her to come back and actually give us some numbers based on what the new assessment derived for us. So I'll ask Linda to share that with you.
Yep, so you'll see that there's a memo from Kelly Rogers in here, who's the literacy coordinator, reading coordinator, we call her everything, she's coordinator of all things. So, as you know, the state has given us a little bit more information about making sure that we have to look for students with dyslexia, however, they're not giving us any programs to work with them. So this year, on top of DIBELS, which is our dynamic early literacy assessment, we've added the rapid automated naming test to that kindergarten and first grade students, so that we could make sure that more students, if they needed supports, could possibly be identified. What we did find is that the DIBELS actually found most of the students. So that's good news, because moving forward, as we have students that are getting older and in their different grades, we want to make sure that we were providing them all with support. So she was just giving you some of the rundowns of some of the numbers at how many students were identified, how many students are receiving support, and then how many of those students were identified based on the RAN. However, if we didn't give the RAN, the DIBELS would have picked them up as students needing support, which is, that's the good news. And we found that at the Merrimack Valley. I've been talking to a lot of assistant superintendents, because everybody's in the same boat. What are you using? How are you doing it? So a lot of people were actually adding the RAN in because we put it in, and they're saying the same things, that at least DIBELS was identifying students that needed support, although this gives us a little bit more detail of what's happening. And until the state gives us that final guidance, this is the situation that we're in. So it's not as if students are not receiving support, we're just trying to find the best way to identify them.
So this is for K and first grade only?
K in first grade only.
Okay, so are we going to move it forward to students in all of the elementary level at some point? What's our plan?
So right now, the state is, again, there's not a lot of information in regards to that. The highest we've seen anyone go with a DIBELS or a RAN is grade 2, but no one's done it yet. That's what they're saying, is that you can go to grade 2. So right now it's K and 1, because you want to capture them earlier. But right now it's K and 1, and until we get a little bit more information, is if we should go to second grade and third grade, because we don't want to keep pulling our kids out for testing, because they still have their iReady, they still have their Fontes and Pinnell base. We have math assessments that are happening on top of it, so the more testing time we add to these students, the more time we're pulling them away from direct instruction. The other piece is that we put in teams of teachers to go in and do this, including we use our interventionists, we use our reading specialists. So again, taking that time from teaching time to add in another test that we're not sure if it's appropriate for that grade level is probably not in our best interest until we have some more information on it and we're identifying it. So both Kelly Rogers and Amy Reese have been going to any of the state-sponsored informational sessions to find out more information and also to network. So this is, we're a little bit in limbo, but we do at least have something in place. So as of right now, no. K and 1 would be our first identifiers.
Okay. Another question for you. Given that you've done this year, what is the difference in numbers from students in the prior year to this year that are receiving the help? In other words, what were our numbers last year?
I don't have last year's number. I only have our current students right now that are in reading support and the percentage of them. So 10% of those students in reading support where the RAN picked them up as well as DIBELS. So we do know that 10% of them are there, but I can't really give you full numbers because of, it's a low number and it can identify how many students at different schools, but we have this year's numbers as to how many students are receiving literacy report. I don't have last year's numbers offhand to be able to tell you what the difference is, if there's been more or less.
So we don't know if this identified more students or not than the year before?
It didn't,
Yeah.
because the DIBELS identified more students than the RAN did. So say we just gave that RAN test, we would have only had 10% of the students that we're currently providing services for. The DIBELS actually picked up more students for services for reading.
Okay, so we don't know if last year we had more students going into reading specialists than we do this year.
Not offhand, I don't have the numbers from last
Okay.
year, I only have this current students and what schools they're in.
Just trying to figure out what's, if it's effective or not.
Just one thing that jumped out to me on this one, because I know we were concerned about this kids potentially falling through the cracks. It was very helpful to me that just through the DIBELS, we identified all of the kids that we also picked up on the RAN. What the RAN allowed us to do is get that more specific information about a potential disability, but those same kids got picked up. So it wasn't like there was another population of kids, 62 from DIBELS, and then there were these other, 30 kids we didn't know about. They were all identified. We
That's
just
good.
now have better data, which is good.
Yeah.
But that leads me to, believe that last year when we were just doing the DIBELS, we still identified the students that were in need of extra reading support. We can get you those numbers, but we still identified them. We just don't have that, or didn't have available to us at that time, that more specific data to be able to really kind of get in early.
So these 62 total is from all the Ks and all the ones, all the first grade and
Among all 4 schools.
all 4 schools, okay? What's that percentage?
Of total students in the
Yeah,
schools?
Of the K in the first grade total.
So, Canto, so you're probably looking
I
at
don't have a overall
2,000
number.
students for the
There
four
are 2,000?
schools,
Okay.
right? And
Yeah,
then,
but no, in first and K.
right, so okay, well, I'm just saying, there's 2,000 students in both the schools. The numbers are pretty low numbers, I would have to add them all up, but right now, I mean, the percentage, so I'm just looking at one of the schools just to see if it would give me something right off the top of the bed. Students assessed,
You have a question while the calculating?
No, well, kind of a sort of question, comment, but I feel better about the level of assessment that we're doing at the younger grades and the level of intervention that we're providing.
Right.
I'm still not completely clear about what happens in the upper grades, so 4 or 5, middle school and high school.
So, actually, you're gonna be receiving another document from me, because I've been putting it together to give you an idea of what the assessments are. So we do have we have iReady for K through 8, so we always have that piece in there. We also have writing prompts. There's other assessments, like for FOSS, there's the FOSS assessments, and then any common assessments that were made by teachers to identify students with potential issues. So we have all of those assessments, and in that document, I've given you an idea of what programs they're using, when they did it for curriculum adoption, a link to find them, and then what assessments they use for that actual program. So it's I broke it down by elementary, middle, and high school. Elementary has the most additional assessments, only because you wanna make sure
Right,
they have that.
right.
So they have the iReady, they have the DIBELS,
The RAN.
they have the RAN, they have the F&P base, which is where the teachers sit with them one-on-one. So even, so for example, say a student didn't get picked up by DIBELS or RAN, okay? Teachers would be working and using the base. They might go and talk to the reading specialist and say, we need to look at this student one more time. And the reading specialist would then give them an additional reading assessment to make sure it wasn't somebody that was missing. So it doesn't preclude, just because you weren't picked up by these two pieces, doesn't preclude you from teachers advocating for students and reading specialists diving a little bit deeper for anybody that wasn't picked up on the original screeners. Because think of them as screeners. We're trying to grab a snapshot, find out how kids are doing, give them an intervention, and then see if they're making effective progress. And the earlier we capture them, the better off we will be.
Right, and I know even in the upper grades, outside of the assessments, there's also the teacher recommendation for further exploration of a possible issue.
And the reading specialists have assessments as well. So we have the LLI piece, so they can use that program to help students and identify what's happening. So there's a lot of back and forth. There's reading assessments beyond just your screeners.
And then, one of the things that I just want to make sure that we have, especially as we're beginning to talk about the budget, is do we have the appropriate interventions for students at the higher grade levels to make sure that their reading issues are addressed?
And honestly, even when you're doing the budget, we bought a lot of those things maybe 4 years ago to make sure we had them in place for students.
Just a couple of numbers for you. So I just want to, it wasn't 62, so for kindergarten, there were 58 students identified in total of 365, so it's 16% of the K.
It's not a small percentage, in my opinion. Yeah,
Oh, no, it's not a small percentage.
it's not,
With first grade, it was 62 of 393,
yeah.
so that's 16% also.
Yeah.
So, I'd have to go back and see what the norms of that test are. I don't know if they predict a certain percentage of students based on population might have that finding, but we can take a peek at that. But basically 16% of those kids. Now, it's a smaller percentage that were actually picked up in the RAN for kids who, might be predisposed to specific learning
So, thank you, I appreciate that. One more question in my mind here. In terms of, because I am concerned about whether older students who, I'm not gonna say older, I'm gonna say in higher grade levels, we are catching them and we're helping them, because every student deserves to be able to read and write. Let's say a student comes into the district, it's their first time in the district. What do you do in terms of testing, and let's say they were at grade 5?
Same piece, we would look at our common assessments, and we would give them we'd have them do the diagnostic on iReady. We would have them do a writing prompt, so they're all assessed when they come into the school, even if it's
Some
grade 5 or
assessment.
6, yep.
Okay.
When you say common assessment, what do you mean?
So a common assessment, so let's say, let's take social studies, for example, right? They don't like, they can use pieces of the iReady for the nonfiction, but then what they have is their DBQs where they'll take like 3 or 4 different artifacts, have the kids take a look at that, analyze it, and see if they can actually come up with a thesis on there. So they'll take that as a common assessment, and then they'll be looking at even the, 6 traits of writing that goes along with it, so the communities kind of blend together. So they would.
More of an internal thing.
Internal, because if they don't have like a norm reference test, or they don't have like an online program, we have to create the program. You can't just take what's in the actual textbook, because we don't know if it's really gonna identify with the standards that we need. So they're all standard-based assessments. So at the high school level, you have a lot more common assessments. We don't have online pieces for them, except for maybe mathematics and English. We have IXL, which is kind of like you have iReady, which has the building blocks. IXL is a little bit more like fact-based, fluency, so they would use those type of programs. But we have common assessments for any of those upper grade levels.
And I do know one of the things that sometimes comes up when we're looking at EL students, and the interaction between special ed and EL, and the ability, how do you determine whether the student who's coming in and writes and reads in a different language fluently or not fluently, you don't know,
Right.
really? What's the assessments that are provided to them?
So for the L students, it's aligned to the standards. They have the 3 different programs, the REACH, Inside, and there's one more, it will come to me. So within that programming, they have assessments for them too, and then working with the L teachers, if the students are not making progress with basic English skills, then you have to start looking into, is there a special needs on top of the language barrier? So you have to identify the language piece first to see if they're picking up on the general skills that they should be based on their WIDA level. If they're not making progress after a certain amount of time, then they would go and consult with special ed, because you'd have to find out if there's a learning disability that's inhibiting them from being able to even pick up the English language. Does that make
And
sense?
do you know if the state guidance is going to include any piece for the EL students?
I don't know, because there's a lot of pieces around L students to help them, make sure they get the proper support, but I don't know if there's anything specific to this dyslexia piece that's going to apply to the L students.
Okay. Thank you.
I haven't read anything, but that doesn't mean there's not something out there. I think we're just trying to, weed through what we're currently doing.
I appreciate this. I think it's very important for us to continue to have this kind of information. To me, this is a pretty large number. I'm hoping that we actually have the sufficient support right now, because I don't know if this is an increased number of students that the reading specialists are seeing, or if it isn't, because we don't have the numbers from the prior years. Having personally, I know what a difference a reading specialist can make in the elementary level. And to me, that is an extremely important thing for us to do as soon as possible in the child's education. So I'm looking at this as we move forward, and I'm looking at budgets and so on. And I think we need to keep on tracking these numbers.
Another thing to keep in mind is we have a few pilots that are happening right now. One of them is Foundations, which is very phonics-based. It's a pretty prescribed program, and we have some K-1 teachers right now piloting it to see if it's something we're going to implement for next year. And I know a lot of districts have had a lot of success with it. So it's a Wilson-based program, but it's tier 1 for all students. So that's going to help us tremendously, because when you have a reading program, you typically only receive like the word work, the phonics work based on the stories. Okay, so you would be breaking down the words. It has some phonics components to it, but it's not as intensive as something like a Foundations. Right now, the teachers were using Lively Letters, and so we're trying to figure out which program would be best. But in my experience and in the piece, in also talking to other districts, I'm finding that Foundations is a pretty prescribed program and has been very helpful, which is part of, like I said, the Wilson program, so it's a tier 1. There's a tier 2 component to it, so if a student wasn't doing well with the tier 1, the reading specialist could implement that based on if we want that or the LLI that we currently have. And then obviously tier 3 is, more of a special ed programming.
Do they have to, the teachers who are doing this pilot program for foundations,
Mhm.
do they have to go through the Wilson training?
No, they have, so what will end up happening is if we move forward with something like foundations, they do have to have a 6-hour training. We'd have to train them this year to have it implemented for next year, but it's, again, it's very, what's nice, it's prescribed, because then you can get used to it, and instead of trying to figure it out yourself, but they would have to have the 6-hour training.
Do you want to just touch base for a second, like a preview about like how we even looked at this particular need for potentially a new reading program at this point, given?
So
everything's
your K-4 right now, they have Journeys. Journeys was adopted by the district in 2011. Doesn't sound like a long time ago, but it was 9 years ago. So what is happening is we have another set of pilots going on, looking at different reading programs. The Journeys program is not being published anymore. So even if we had another grade level that we had to add to it, I cannot purchase it. We're missing books, they're gone, right? You would have to go through Follett or look on Amazon, I don't know, go to a garage sale, try and find some books for students. So right now, in addition to Foundations, because Foundations is a phonics program, that's it. It's not a reading program, it's a phonics program, which helps you read. It gives you those foundations, but they're foundations. We also have, Houghton Mifflin is our program we typically use, so we have Into Reading that we're using with Houghton Mifflin. And the second program is F&P Classroom, which is Fontes and Pinnell, which is still the balanced literacy. So we have a combination between the 4 elementary schools, grade K1, 2, 3, and 4 teachers. We didn't take one from each school because that would be too many people. They're right now piloting those in those classrooms. Kelly and I have learning walks set up for the first week of February. The teachers have all their materials, and they're in the process of doing that because as a district, we do have to provide another reading program. That leaves 5th grade, I will tell you, in the mix by themselves because they would still have the Journeys program, but we'd have to look at what would be appropriate for them because they don't have the same setup as an elementary school. That happened with Journeys too. It's set up for an elementary literacy block, not a middle school literacy block. So for that 1 year, we're gonna have to work through what would be the next steps for them. There are some options for them because some of these programming have, I call it a la carte. You don't have to buy the whole kit and caboodle. You can buy certain components, which could be more appropriate for our 5th grade teachers. But right now, they're a little busy. They have their one-to-one. They have standards-based report cards. Now's not the time. We'll work with K4 right now and work on those reading programs and then come up with a recommendation based on the pilots and the surveys that those teachers will fill out. And they're receiving PD as well.
So that's a big,
That's big picture.
big coming.
And you'll see that in that, I have another because I gave you one document tonight, thought I'd give you a second one moving forward. In that document, you'll see some of the different programs that we have and the years that they were adopted. That's important, because in a perfect world, you would buy new curriculum every 6 years. In the real world, it's every 10-ish. I've gone longer. So it's time for K through 4 at this point. They used to have the Scholastic reading program prior to this, and then Journeys came in.
When you do pilots, because we seem to pilot,
Great
I'm always
word.
hearing the word pilot. When you do pilots in curriculum, what happens in the following year, once you've done the pilot? How do you then decide whether you're gonna integrate that, how you're going to integrate it, and who's part of that decision-making? How is staff part of that in that whole, say, grade level, elementary, how do you do it?
So that's the pilot teachers are the committee, so consider them the committee. They have, usually you can do upwards of 3, I wouldn't recommend more than 3, but right now we had 4 vendors come in. Out of the 4, we felt like 2 of them were more appropriate, so that's why we only have the 2 vendors at this point. So they have pretty extensive surveys that they have to fill out for us, because it's easy to be like, I like this program, because you have it in front of you and it looks exciting and it's brand new and it's shiny. However, when they go through these rubrics of these surveys, it's pretty eye-opening, because all of a sudden they're like, oh, wait a minute, it doesn't have this component. So after we complete those surveys, we'll get them together, and as a committee, so that would be the committee, including myself, Kelly Rogers, you know, we'd have Stephanie part of that too, Stephanie Quinn. If we go into 5th grade, I would pull in Abby Dick into that because she would be working with those teachers. Then we really come up with which program we're gonna go with. You make that decision now, before next year, because a lot of their summer work or any PD that we have for them is all of this, and all of their PD days would be on their new reading program.
Okay.
Elementary tends to be very focused on a topic because they have something new each time. So like the FOSS kits, all their PD was FOSS because they have to really understand their programming in front of them. So that decision is made, you know, by the committee, then we also have to look at costs, right? And then that recommendation would come forward, and we would have to decide how we're gonna fund these pieces.
Okay. I just think if, it's difficult for staff. I would think it's very difficult for a teacher to make a change like that and having that summer, having that time. But what do we need to do, and what, as a committee and in allocating monies and so on, what do we need to do to help, to support? Is it that they need more time in the summer, that they need to be compensated for, because if a teacher has done a pilot, they've already done it one time, they're, in my opinion, gonna be much better off with their class next year than the
Oh, I would
ones who
totally
didn't do
sign
it.
up for a pilot, absolutely.
Absolutely.
But that's okay. I mean, so the hard part about summer, we have plenty of money for summer work. The hard part about that is not all teachers can participate. So you really have to lean on your professional development days. And then the companies, when you end up buying a new program, so what I need from you is some money. So let me answer that first question, a lot of it. The second part is those programs, we give us a certain amount of PD. And the new thing that they're going with, which I think is the right way to do it, instead of just even the PD days that you have the 2.5 hours, a full day, whatever it may be, they're starting to understand that we need in-class coaching. So a lot of their PD programming now is the outside, pull everybody together, get together by grade level, but now we're gonna provide you with a consultant to go in and work with the teachers physically in the classroom as they're trying to work the programs. I would have to say, well, first of all, we cannot purchase their program as a district, we cannot support Journeys anymore. It's not there. But I would have to say, it takes you, the first year's bumpy, but it's still teaching reading. They know how to teach. They just have new things to work with it. You have to provide them with the time to talk to their, teammates, and everybody comes up with a new idea. You try it, it works. Sometimes you open up the door and say, don't do it, and shut the door again. It's gonna take them at least 2 years to feel like they have their legs under them to start. So yes, it's gonna be a lot of work, and they understand that, similar to when they just finished off their last part of FOSS. That took them 3 years to incorporate all 3 of those pieces.
All right, anything else on literacy update?
Oh, I'm still
Okay,
on.
next, the curriculum instruction and assessment guide.
Yeah, we're gonna keep Linda on the hot seat here.
Keep going, just keep going. So I know that there was a call for what is curriculum, who's doing what, where, when, and why. So I thought I would put together a document for you about the, who's who of curriculum and how to get in touch with them and what grade levels they service. As I said earlier, I made an additional document. Do you see an organizational chart in there, Maria? I love it, she's got it,
Right
she's
here.
got an organization chart. So you have 2 of them, you have one for the district, and then you have just the curriculum one. So I thought what I would do is at least give you the who's who. I know you've seen them, you've talked to them, however, it's nice to have this as a guide. I'm never changing my picture, I just want to be very, very clear on that. That's the only, I'm not very photogenic, so when I grab a picture, it stays forever. So just to give you an idea of what grade levels they're working with too, because I know that there was some requests for that, and then how to get in touch with everyone. And what I've been working on for the past couple of nights, and I will add it to this document and give you another one as well, is just the different programs we have for the grade levels, by level, elementary, middle, and high school. So at least to give you who's doing what, and there's a lot of departments, there's 15 departments.
Yes.
And there's not 15 coordinators. So hopefully this is helpful to give you at least some insight of what is the curriculum and who's doing what.
So I appreciate that. Thank you.
I'll put it in a nice little binder one for you, so you can have like a hard copy that's with the, I'll make a nicer one.
Oh, I love it, thanks.
You're welcome.
So
Walk around with it.
I always appreciate when Linda pulls up her high school yearbook picture.
It's not like high school. It's so, I know, it's so funny when parents will come and meet, they're like, oh, You don't look the same. I'm like, yes, I know. It's hard.
All right, well, thank you.
Yeah, no problem.
Next item for me, just your personnel report for the month of December. Not too much activity going on in the district. Just a few new hires, a couple of resignations, and no retirements or assignment changes.
Any questions on the personnel? All right, field trips?
Field trips, just two this evening. First is students participating in the French program at McCarthy Middle School, looking to do that overnight French exchange with Quebec City. So that is May 1st through 3rd. And then secondly, this is a summer program experience. The Give Club at the high school would like to be able to go and volunteer at Camp Sunshine in Casco, Maine, this summer, the week of July 12th to 17th. So just seek your approval for participation on those two endeavors.
I make a motion to approve the conferences and field trip requests as presented.
Any seconds?
I have a question, second.
You're
Second.
second first. Okay,
Second.
Donna seconds. Okay, questions?
Who are the chaperones? Do we have chaperones for the GIVE program, the GIVE one?
Yeah, there's an advisor.
Just
For
one?
the- which program?
Just
The
one?
Give one?
What is the GIVE program anyways?
Is this one that's up in New Hampshire? This
No,
is,
it's the main.
is this with Stina?
Yeah, Stina.
Yeah,
Campbell.
so Stina Cavarud, she's one of the English teachers at CHS, and she's also the advisor for the club. So she is the chaperone.
Okay, gotcha,
Yeah.
all right.
And what is the club? Is this community service club or?
I believe so. I don't know enough about it, so, but it
It's community
seems,
service volunteering
Okay.
type club.
Okay.
yeah, she had emailed to find out how she goes about, the students had shown an interest in this, so she had emailed how to get on to the school committee piece. I said, work through the high school, fill out the paperwork, and now it's here for you.
It's during the summer, right?
It is.
Are they working as counselors or are they?
Well, it's my understanding they're going to actually, volunteer to help out kids in this camp. So,
And they're staying at the camp?
they're staying at the
Okay.
camp, yeah. Again, we don't do a lot of field trip type things over the summer,
Right.
but where this was a trip, it's out of state, it's our staff member going with our students for the trip.
Okay.
We just kind of felt it better to be overly above board and have this on the agenda, just to formalize it for both the student and the staff. If someone ever got hurt at the camp, we don't want to have any issues about not being covered, health-wise or anything like that. And it's a very worthwhile endeavor.
Good experience.
Okay.
What's that?
Is one chaperone enough?
Let's say again,
Is one chaperone enough?
how many students do they have?
12.
That's,
Yeah,
usually it's
there's-
1 to
there's
10,
12
1
kids
to
in the
12.
club.
All right.
But there's going to be a lot of other
Other
people
adults there at the camp.
at the
too.
camp. I think she's just taking
Yeah.
a pack of kids with her.
Children.
What's that?
I said a pack of
Yeah,
children.
one chaperone to 12 students, right?
Yeah.
All right, any other questions on the field trips? Okay, all in favor? Aye.
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 Anybody opposed? Abstentions? Okay, 5-0.
Thank you.
All right, so we're gonna push the executive session till the end, so any liaison reports
Yes. I'm gonna get mine next meeting.
next week, okay? Jeff, you have one?
I went to the CHIPS PTO and their sock drive. They gathered almost 500 pairs of socks.
Wow.
They had a very successful holiday luncheon for the staff at CHIPS. They had Andy Rieger from the Music Academy come in and do a presentation for the students. And this week, they're having Sugarbug Dental coming in and going to the classroom and talk about healthcare. I'm just amazed at how much they do for the students. They have something every month. The Seacoast Science Center's coming in March. They do with the town the Touch a Truck, and then they work on the field day in June. It's just, for a small group, they do a lot of really incredible work for the students and the staff at CHIPS.
Ray, you had some?
Yes, so I attended the McCarthy PTO meeting, and they have their rock and roll bingo, which is one of their biggest fundraisers, coming up on March 27th at the Elks. Their February 5th will be the science fair, which has really been very successful at that level, and I'm sure you, Joanna, will too attest to the fact that we attended the STEM fair at
Yep.
McCarthy. Did you hold a brain? I didn't. I decided not to, but it was excellent.
I passed.
I passed too, but it was absolutely excellent. The other thing I wanted to really comment on that was that at that STEM fair, some high school teachers were there. I was very pleased to meet them and to see that they were showing what can be done at the high school level in STEM, and students were loving it. I attended the Harrington PTO meeting. Tonight was their Heritage Festival, which I've missed, but my entire family is there representing Portugal in a table. Plus, we had the EL Council represented. I would like to compliment the Harrington PTO. I think they're doing a tremendous job of keeping things going. I also had the pleasure of attending the wellness meeting. They're doing the Youth at Risk survey, behavioral survey, which this year will be done to both the middle school and the high school level. And the wonderful thing about that is that they received a $4,500 grant from Lowell General, for which we say thank you. And that does identify many behavioral things that we need to, I'm sure they'll present to us in the future on this. There was also a presentation by the community ed folks on what's going on at, with that enrichment program after school at South Row. It was very positive feedback, and that they were going to now present this to the principals at the elementary level. So it was a very positive thing, and that they have many candidates who want to do it. It involved quite a few vendors from the community, and they figure out a way to do it well and keep the costs as low as they can. They'll come and present, I think, towards the end of the year, but it was a positive report. Thank you.
Don, anything? I have nothing. Okay. As was already mentioned, last night was the Taste of Chelmsford. Don and I both attended, and it was a huge crowd as always. Huge crowd, great food, lots of it. It's a great event. I mean, if you ever go, it's just wall-to-wall people pretty much, but they do an awesome job with that, and they raise a lot of money, so it's great, you know, because it all goes back to the kids. The other thing I want to just mention, you talked a couple weeks ago about study committee assignments. Jeff had volunteered to do the Plateau Committee. I know he's already met. And then Donna, you're going to take on the sick bank study committee. Maria, the moderator, coach stipends, and
Oh, is that, do they have meetings already coming
they
up?
haven't had meetings yet.
We're gonna coordinate
Yeah.
soon.
So we're gonna.
Okay, I'm
and then-
excited about this committee. I can't wait. Then I can tell you what the give
I'm excited too.
club is.
And I'm gonna take the support personnel substitution, so those other ones should be meeting soon, and, you know, we'll try to take care of those issues
My
there.
committee's gonna be more exciting.
I'm sure it will. With you on it, absolutely.
I smell a challenge. Do you have a bus? No.
There goes the bus again.
All right, any new agenda items that people wanna bring forward? Next meeting, we're, you know, back at it in another week from now. One of the things I mentioned this the last time is I would take a look at our goals, so I have thrown something together. I kinda went through our agenda since August and try to pick out where in our agendas we're kind of meeting some of our goals. So I made that list, and I'll send it out to you. I also kind of try to brainstorm some of the ways that we might be able to continue to address the goals going forward. So if you could particularly look at that and come up with some other ideas that we can add to that list, so that, you know, as we go from the second half of the year, we can keep working towards those goals. So I'll send it out next couple days, if you could just take a look at that, because, again, it's gonna be a quick turnaround, and we're gonna be back here in 7 days, so. The other thing is if you have any executive session minutes, I'll continue to press. Can you, you know, please get them in, and we'll try to get some of those out of the way, you know, some of the older ones, and get them approved. And
So, just to, you know, I submitted some.
Yep.
Okay, so I have one that I have not submitted,
Okay.
and today's,
great.
I'll work with Debbie on trying to finalize the list of what's
Yeah.
outstanding, and we can circulate that around.
Right.
I'm glad to reach out, if she needs to reach out and on
They
any
go
other
back even
things.
beyond you.
Okay,
Yeah.
So
great.
I'll get a complete list.
All the way back to Donna.
And we've
I'll
got,
be
I knew it
I wouldn't have done that. We've got some that, like we have, but we just haven't approved because there's still
Yes.
action pending,
Right.
I
so.
was gonna say mine are
I'll-
action
I'll
pending.
go through,
Action-packed.
All right, this will be the history of the secretaries.
yeah,
Right.
I'll go through all that for you and tell you we'll come up with a little sheet to share.
All right, I'm gonna assume there's no public comment at this point, so I will entertain a motion to adjourn to executive session and not return.
I make a motion to adjourn to executive session and not return to regular session for the purpose of convening an executive session to conduct strategy sessions in preparation for negotiations with non-union personnel.
Second.
Second, that was nicely done, by the way. Thank you. All right, Jeff, Donna,
Aye.
Maria.
Aye.
John.
Aye.
Aye. Okay, 5-0. We'll close the public meeting and adjourn to executive
minutes?
session. Yeah, a couple minutes break.